What is up, guys? Welcome to another Bible study. This time we're on 2 Corinthians verses 11, 16 through 33. So if you haven't already done this Bible study with me or been tuning in, we've been doing a Bible study on 2 Corinthians verse by verse on almost every single book. And today we're going to have a Bible study on 2 Corinthians 16 through 33. So come Bible study with me, open your Bible, and I'll see you in 2 Corinthians 11. Here's what it says. Paul suffering for Christ. Now, before I preface this, this is basically Paul ranting. I'm not even going to lie. This is literally a rant from Paul. And it's kind of funny, reading out loud. And I was smiling before last night when I was reading this, because I thought of how funny this is going to be to read it out loud. So let's go ahead and read what it says. It says, I repeat, let no one consider me a fool. But if you do, at least accept me as a fool so I can boast a little. What I am saying in this manner of boasting, I don't speak as the Lord would, but as it were foolishly. Since many boast according to the flesh, I will also boast. For you being so wise, gladly put up with fools. In fact, you put up with it if someone enslaves you, if someone exploits you, if someone takes advantage of you, if someone is arrogant towards you, if someone slaps you in the face. I say this to our shame, we have been too weak for that. Here's where he really gets into the rant, guys. I mean, it's a rant with a purpose, but it's still a rant, okay? He goes, but in whatever anyone dares to boast, I am talking foolishly, I also dare. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they descendants of Abraham? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? So am I. Or he didn't say so am I. I'm talking like a madman. I'm a better woman, far more labors, many more imprisonments, far worse beatings, and many times near death. 5 times I received 40 lashes minus 1 from the Jews. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I received a stoning. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I have spent a night and a day in the open sea. On frequent journeys I faced dangers from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my own people, dangers from Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, and dangers among false brothers. Toil and hardship, many sleepless nights, hunger and thirst, often without food, cold, and without clothing. Not to mention other things, there is a daily pressure on me of my concern for all the churches. Who is weak, and I am not weak? Who is made to stumble, and I do not burn with indignation? If boasting is necessary, I will boast about my weaknesses. The God and Father of the Lord Jesus, who is blessed forever, knows that I am not lying. In Damascus, a ruler under King Aretas guarded the city of Damascus in order to arrest me. So I was let down in a basket through a window in the wall and escaped from his hands. So yeah, guys, Paul is ranting. In case you can tell, Paul was giving a super, basically just a long rant about why, specifically why he deserves to be an apostle, how he has suffered for Christ. Now, if you remember in the very beginning of Corinthians, okay, in the very beginning, he was talking about, wow, do I really got to give you guys my resume? If you haven't seen the 2 Corinthians, the beginning of probably in 2 Corinthians 3, so go ahead and check that one out. But Paul's literally saying, okay, I guess that wasn't good enough for you, so now look at all this stuff. Look at all this stuff now. Here's what he says. So we'll take it line by line. In this case, we'll take it paragraph by paragraph or chunk. Because if I were to do line by line, I'd be here for an hour doing these with you. So he says, I repeat, let no one consider me a fool. But if you do, at least accept me as a fool so that I can boast a little. There is Paul's sarcasm. He's saying, if you're going to call me a fool to my face. Call me to my face so I can boast about it. That's literally what he's saying. Remember, they were calling him a fool for a variety of reasons. We talked about in the previous 2 Corinthians 11 Bible study that, he was giving away his speeches for free, which was very taboo in the Greek time. He was also a very weak person, physically very weak. And he was also, to the Corinthian church, he seemed like a little pushover, What I'm saying in this manner, or boasting, I do not speak as the Lord would, but as it were foolishly. Since many boast according to the flesh, I will also boast. Okay, so he's saying, man, if you're going to boast about your fleshly works, I'll boast too. Look at what I've done and what I've suffered, my fleshly works for the gospel. And then he goes on to label all of these different things. But what I think is really important is when in verses 19 through 21, they really spoke to me when I was reading it. Here's what they said. In fact, you put up with it when someone enslaves you, if someone exploits you, if someone takes advantage of you, if someone is arrogant towards you, if someone slaps you in the face. I say this to our shame. We have been too weak for that. And I was reading that and I was like, man, how often do we do the same thing? Like, how often are we putting up with someone who enslaves us or tells us what to do? How often do we put up with people who seek to use us? How often do we, put up with people who take advantage of us, people who are arrogant and mean to you, and people who, may slap you in the face or give you a sweet kiss and then behind your back stab you in the back, right? How often do we put up with that? Now, are we called to put up with that? I don't have an answer for that. I don't have an answer. But I was really thinking, like, man, we do, this isn't just for the Corinthian church, guys. Like, we also, many of us fall into this same trap. We fall into the same trap of giving effort into things that want our attention. We are beings that want attention. We always want to be attention. And we want affection from others as well. We want attention and affection, and we're so concerned with our perception. And so we're concerned with all these things, so we think that if we just please everybody else and we do whatever we can to please everybody else, that we'll get a reward. But the thinking is, and what's wrong, is that we shouldn't be, pleasing everybody. We should only be pleasing God. See, the people in this world can only give us worldly things, okay? For example, if you're, if you please your girlfriend, you may be getting something else afterwards. If you're going to a bar and you're trying to please your friends by taking a shot, what do you know? You're probably going to end up taking a couple more shots. And so it's honestly here, and he says in verse 21, I say this to our shame, we have been too weak for that. Like, guys, we have been too weak to do this stuff. We are too weak. And then Paul later goes on to say in verse 30 that if he's going to boast about anything, it's going to be about his weakness. So even though he's too weak for these things, right, we're still supposed to be humble. We're still supposed to be honest. Now, Jesus could also be, Jesus was also kind of a doormat, not going to lie. Like, remember, people were literally running up to him in crowds and just touching him, and he was letting people just touch him. There's a girl who went and touched his robe, and then this girl was healed, okay? Like, Jesus also was also being used and taken advantage of. But how did Jesus respond? Well, he responded with love. He responded with faith and wise words. Now, the rest of this chapter shows, basically why Paul suffered, and how Paul, if you want to brag about the works of the flesh, why Paul suffered more did everything. So he says here, but in whatever anyone dares to boast, I am talking foolishly. I also dare. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they descendants of Abraham? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I'm talking like a madman. I'm a better one, with far more labors, many more imprisonments, far worse beatings, and many times near death. So, all these Hebrews, Israelites, descendants of Abraham, they were all characteristics of people who were Christians, right? Most of the Christians came from Israel at this time, or around then, right? Even though we're in Rome, in the very beginning, right? Israelites in the Old Testament are God's chosen people. Hebrews is where the Old Testament was written, the language of the Old Testament, so Paul could understand Hebrew. Remember, he was raised in the Jewish faith, so we can assume that his mother or father may have came from Jerusalem. They said, are they descendants of Abraham? If you know, we are all descendants of Abraham, okay? We are all descendants of Abraham. In fact, Jesus comes from Abraham's bloodline. So we are descendants of Abraham. And then he says, are they servants of Christ? He says, I'm talking like a madman. I'm a better one. I'm a better servant of Christ than you guys. I have labored harder. I've endured more struggles. I've done this, this, and this. And so he's taking, this idea of boasting about his weakness, and he's like taking it to the max. Like, he's not afraid to show all the negative things he went through. And he gives us a little taste of it when he says, with far more labors, more imprisonments, worse beatings, and many times near death. Now in verse 24, he starts to say all the different reasons why he has suffered for Christ, and how he has suffered, and why his suffering was greater than someone else. Okay, he says this: 5 times I received 40 lashes minus 1 from the Jews. Now minus 1 actually means 39, so they didn't receive 40, and they lashed him 39 as punishment because they were afraid of going over the 40 lashes. So they would give him like a 1-point buffer. So they'd be like, we're only going to lash you 39 times just so we're safe, and in case we miss and go to 40. Because after you're whipping them once, you almost start to lose track. And if you lost track halfway through, you kind of had to assume where you were. And so you thought you would be pretty close. So they would give you a 1-point buffer naturally. And he said he was whipped 5 times. 5 times. So 39 times 5, I don't even know what that is. Maybe like 50. I don't know, we'll call it 150, right? 150 times for the gospel. He was whipped over 500 times, which means his back guys probably had tons of scars. No wonder why he was very weak. He was whipped like 200 times. So he probably took off his shirt and there were tons of markings on the back of it. And then he says, 3 times I was beaten with rods. So 3 times he was then beaten with rods. That'd be kind of like getting beaten up with the bat nowadays, right? It hurt. You're having a literal rod beat up on your bones and you're getting destroyed. Then he says, once I even received a stoning, they would literally throw big stones at him and chuck him as hard as they can. Then he says, 3 times I was shipwrecked. 3 times he was at sea, shipwrecked. 3 different times being lost at sea, which means he had no food, no water at sea. He said, I spent a night and a day in open sea. Right? And remember, he was shipwrecked at this time. So he didn't have like a place. So he spent a day and a night at the open sea. Then he says, on frequent journeys, I faced danger from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my own people, dangers from Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, dangers among false brothers. Guys, he dealt with all of these dangers. To sum it up so far, here's what he's saying. I paraphrase this in the chat, or not in the chat, in my margin, because I knew that it would be very helpful. So he's saying, basically, I'm Christian because I've been beaten up for Jesus. I spent time in prison for Jesus. I traveled miles and endured many hardships, and I endured many, many perils. That's why he was a Christian. That's why he's saying, I'm a better Christian because of all these different things. So he's saying, and on frequent journeys, as he was traveling and going through miles and hardships, he was... Remember, dangers from rivers, right? Dangers from rivers. He would go along the river, most likely getting robbed or maybe getting a storm. Also, maybe dangers from robbers, right? People would rob him all the time. It's not like Paul was staying at these like super fancy places. Like, no, he didn't have much money. He was doing these sermons for free. So he was staying in bottom places, like very, very bad places. Dangers from his own people, okay? People wanted to see Paul die all the time. He was almost killed multiple times in Acts. And then he says dangers from Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness. No matter where he's at in his environment, Paul is just consistently enduring hardships for the gospel. But we see that even though Paul had so many more hardships, Paul was also way, way, way more blessed. I remember at a time, the day before he was sentenced to death, he was in prison. And then God made an earthquake happen and he freed him from prison. That is a blessing in disguise. So then he tells all about these different dangers, okay? And really what he's saying is, guys, I endured a whole lot. That's essentially what he's saying. Then he says, toil and hardships, many sleepless nights, hunger and thirst, often without food, cold, and without clothing. See, everything before this was product of outside of him, okay? It was product of maybe people, his environment, his situation. But the next part, he goes into his actual physical body. Like, what was the physical toll, okay? Remember, he didn't have food or water. He was cold. He often didn't have clothes. He would go long nights without sleep. So this was talking now about the physical perils he was going through. So we talked about the external perils. Then he talked about the internal perils. And then he begins to talk about the one peril that supersedes all of them. A peril that he takes willingly. And that is other things. There is a daily pressure on me. My concern for all the churches. Paul cared about the churches, and he cared about the church. He wanted to see them come to fruition. He wanted to see it. Now, verse 29 says, who is weak, and am I not weak? Who is made to stumble, and did I not burn with indignation? Guys, he's saying, who is weak? I'm not weak. I went through all this, so you tell me who is weak. He's saying, who is made to stumble? Tell me. I didn't stumble when I was doing all this, so tell me, who is made to stumble? Which one of your prophets did that? Which one of your prophets can say they overcame that? In reality, none of the prophets overcame that. Then he goes on to say, and highlight, you don't have to highlight verse 30, but I'm going to highlight it because it's a really apparent reminder to me. He says, if boasting is necessary, I will boast about my weakness. Man, we should all be boasting about our weakness. We begin to see in chapter 12, tomorrow's Bible study, that he talks a whole lot about this idea of weakness and how God's power is actually strengthened during your weakness. But I'm not going to spoil all that for you. He says, the God and Father of Lord Jesus, who is blessed forever, knows I'm not lying. Right? The God of heavens knows he's not lying. Now, this Corinthian church was calling basically Paul a liar for everything. And he says, you may call me a liar, but I know that I'm not lying because I know God knows that I'm not lying. He's seen what I go through. And then he says, in Damascus, a ruler under King Aretas guarded the city of Damascus in order to arrest me. So I was let down in a basket through a window, in the wall and escaped from my hands. Okay, now this is known as the first peril of Paul. Now, if you want to know where this is in Acts 9:90 or 9:23 through 25. He was basically trying to escape Damascus from these bad rulers. And this was the very first time Paul really encountered a trial. So basically, he's honestly, what he's really saying by ending this chapter in this, he's saying, this is how it began. This is how my journey with God began, guys. Can you say that you fled from a king? That's how your journey began? No, you can't. That's it for the 2 Corinthians Bible study on verses 16 through 23. If you guys haven't already, subscribe. And if you haven't already, go and check out 2 Corinthians, or even check the playlist and get all the Bible study for 2 Corinthians. I love you guys. God bless you. Peace.